Robert and Carol retire on the same day with the same savings. But one withdrawal choice quietly changes everything. Robert follows the famous 4% rule because he wants his money to survive a long and unpredictable retirement. Carol thinks 6% sounds reasonable because she wants to enjoy more money while she is healthy enough to use it. At first, Carol looks smarter because retirement should fund a life, not preserve the largest possible account balance. But a withdrawal rate can look safe for years, while quietly creating a problem that appears much later in retirement. So we give them identical portfolios, returns, inflation, and exactly the same 30-year retirement horizon. The only difference is how much they pull from the portfolio, which makes this a clean test of retirement spending math. And the most dangerous result is not who loses first, but how long the losing strategy can look completely successful. Both retire at age 65 with $1 million invested in exactly the same balanced retirement portfolio. Robert withdraws 4%, or $40,000, during the first year and raises that dollar amount with inflation. Carol withdraws 6%, or $60,000, during year one and gives herself the same inflation adjustment. For this simple illustration, the portfolio earns 5.8% each year, while inflation runs at 2%. That return is not a forecast. It is a clean assumption designed only to isolate the withdrawal decision between them. Taxes, Social Security, pensions, fees, and unexpected expenses are excluded, so both paths remain directly comparable. Robert is not withdrawing 4% of the new balance every year. His first dollar amount rises with inflation. Carol follows the same structure, which means her higher starting withdrawal also becomes larger every single year. After 5 years, Robert still has about $1.09 million, while Carol has roughly $976,000 remaining. Carol has spent about $312,000 by then, versus roughly $208,000 for Robert over the same period. Carol enjoyed about $104,000 more spending and still has almost her full starting portfolio. If you stop the experiment here, 6% would look aggressive but surprisingly successful for a new retiree. This is why withdrawal mistakes are deceptive. The portfolio can stay large long after the plan becomes fragile. Robert's smaller withdrawals leave more capital invested, so more of the portfolio keeps participating in future growth. Carol removes more money every year, and each removed dollar also loses every future return it could have earned. The difference starts slowly, because both portfolios are still large enough for market growth to hide the spending gap, but compounding works on what remains, so the consequences accelerate as Carol's investable balance becomes smaller. After 10 years, Robert holds about $1.19 million, while Carol has approximately $907,000 left. Carol has withdrawn about $657,000, while Robert has taken roughly $438,000 during those 10 years. She enjoyed about $219,000 more spending, so the higher withdrawal still seems reasonable. Robert actually has more money than he started with, while Carol still retains more than 90% of hers. That creates the psychological trap. A strategy can feel validated because the account has not visibly collapsed yet. Now move forward another decade, because retirement math becomes much less forgiving when time keeps compounding. Robert continues taking inflation-adjusted withdrawals while the remaining capital keeps earning the assumed return. Carol does exactly the same thing, except her original spending promise started 50% higher than Robert's. After 20 years, Robert has about $1.4 million, while Carol holds only around $558,000 remaining. By then, Carol has withdrawn about $1.46 million, compared with roughly $972,000 for Robert. She has spent almost $486,000 more, but now she has less than 40% of Robert's portfolio. This is where the same 6% strategy finally stops looking generous and starts looking financially dangerous. Carol's annual withdrawal is also much larger now because both retirees have been increasing spending with inflation. The portfolio therefore faces two pressures at once: a smaller balance and a larger dollar withdrawal every year. Robert has the opposite combination because his lower withdrawals preserve more capital to compound through time. After 25 years, Robert holds about $1.51 million, while Carol has fallen to roughly $220,000. Carol has spent about $1.92 million in total, while Robert has withdrawn about $1.28 million. She received roughly $641,000 more spending, but her remaining safety margin has almost disappeared. One strong year could temporarily improve the picture, but the basic withdrawal burden is now extremely difficult. Then the part that surprises most people arrives. Carol does not fail in year 5, 10, 15, or even 20. In this smooth return example, her portfolio finally crosses zero during year 28, before the planned finish. By year 30, Robert still has roughly $1.62 million invested after inflation-adjusted withdrawals. He withdrew about $1.62 million over 30 years, while still preserving more than he started with. Carol's mistake was not spending more. It was promising herself a high withdrawal without a rule for cutting back. That distinction matters because 6% is not automatically irresponsible across every possible retirement plan. A shorter retirement, guaranteed income, lower future spending, or flexible withdrawals can change that answer. But 6% with automatic inflation increases is a very different promise from 6% with real guardrails. Current retirement research makes the same distinction between fixed spending and strategies that adapt to markets. A fixed approach protects the spending target, while a dynamic approach protects the portfolio by adjusting spending. That means Carol can redesign her strategy instead of simply choosing between $60,000 and $40,000. She could begin higher, then accept predetermined cuts when markets or portfolio balances move against her plan. Dynamic spending can also allow modest increases during strong markets instead of forcing the same rigid path forever. The trade-off is obvious. Carol gains spending flexibility, but she loses the certainty of a steadily rising paycheck. Robert gets more predictable spending, but that predictability can leave him with far more unused wealth at the end. Neither benefit is free, because retirement income is a trade between lifestyle today and resilience decades from now. Vanguard shows dynamic plans with increases capped at 5% and spending cuts capped at 2.5%. Those guardrails are examples, not universal rules, because the right limits depend on goals and circumstances. Morningstar's recent base case puts a fixed real withdrawal rate near 3.9% for a 30-year retirement. That estimate targets a 90% chance of funds remaining, not a guarantee for any individual retiree. The important point is that 4% was never a magical law promising the perfect retirement outcome for everyone. It is a planning framework built around longevity, market uncertainty, inflation, and the desire for stable spending. Carol's 6% choice changes the objective because she values higher spending today more than ending wealth later. That can be rational if she understands the risk and can reduce withdrawals when conditions suddenly become worse. It becomes dangerous when 6% is treated like a guaranteed paycheck that must rise regardless of markets. Sequence risk makes this even harder because poor returns early in retirement can damage a portfolio much faster. Our smooth example deliberately removes that risk, which means real-world outcomes can be better or much worse. A retiree who starts during a strong market may support higher spending longer than someone hit by an early crash. That is why a single withdrawal percentage cannot tell you whether a retirement plan is actually safe for your life. You also need to know how long money must last, how much spending can fall, and what other income sources exist. Robert's plan wins our fixed spending test because it survives 30 years with a very large remaining portfolio. Carol's original plan loses because it runs out before the horizon, even though it appeared healthy for decades. But the deeper lesson is not that everyone must choose 4% and permanently refuse to spend another dollar. The lesson is that higher spending needs a mechanism for adjustment instead of blind confidence in one percentage. If Carol wants $60,000 initially, she must decide today what happens when the portfolio falls behind. Would she skip an inflation raise, cut travel, reduce discretionary spending, or use another guaranteed income source? Those decisions are much easier to make before a crash than while watching a retirement account fall in real time. Robert should ask the opposite question. If his portfolio grows, is preserving every extra dollar actually his goal? If he has no major legacy target, an overly rigid spending rule could leave experiences unfunded and wealth unused. So the correct withdrawal strategy is not simply the smallest percentage or the largest amount a calculator allows. It is the highest sustainable lifestyle you can support while accepting the adjustments your plan may require. Robert bought durability by spending less, while Carol bought a richer early retirement by accepting much more risk. Only Robert defined the risk before the money was gone, which is why his original plan survives this comparison. And Carol's real mistake was not choosing 6%. It was acting as if 6% could never need to change. So which promise would you rather make to yourself? Spend less with stability or spend more and accept future cuts?